Now, when Beethoven published the Fifth Symphony, everyone knew at that moment he was doing something radically new. It was no longer considered a classical symphony. It was romantic. So in the music field, just like in the writing field, just like in the artistic painting and drawing and sculpting field, we're beginning to see this kind of shift that we're wanting to introduce you to. This is in many ways going to be a break with the Enlightenment, and it's also in many ways going to be a critique. Now let's think about a couple of Wordsworthian texts that maybe help us with this one. The first one is not in your hymnal, but it's maybe one you've been introduced to. Wordsworth in Lyrical Ballads wrote these lines. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began? So is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Let's just point out two things about this little simple poem. One, it ain't simple. After it's simple, it ain't simple. In other words, Wordsworth and the Romantics like to move from the simple to the complex, not unlike those metaphysical poets of the Renaissance period. Notice what he says. I get happy when I see a rainbow. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. A rainbow? Are you serious? What's the point of a rainbow? He says he gets happy when he sees a rainbow. He says, I was this way when I was a child. So was it when my life began? So is it now? He says that I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old. Whoa, did you hear what he just said? Or let me die. If I ever come to a point, he says, in my life where I don't look at a rainbow and get all kind of giddy and happy feet, put a bullet in me, then I'm ready to go. Whoa. Then he says something quite fascinating that he will again repeat in another poem. The child is father of the man. What? The child is father of the man. So, for example, I understand that you have a father. The father is father to you. How can you be the father to your father? The easy insight here is to change the word father to simply teacher. The child is teacher to the man, to the woman. And I had a student once who said this in her senior year as she was moving towards graduation. She said, I think I understand what this means. Our parents raise us, and then we turn around and raise them. And her colleagues wanted to know what she meant by that. And she said, it's pretty simple. I'm ready to graduate. My mama is not handling this very well. Just saying. And as we're getting closer to this experience of my graduation, I realized something. There are things she will only learn because of me. There are things she will only understand because I'm going to be the one that teaches them to her. The child is father of the man. And then to finish the poem, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Piety, of course, our word pious here meaning good, morally upright. In other words, the hope at the end of our little poem is that his infatuation with rainbows is symbolic of his connection to nature, which will allow for him to live a life that is, for him, pious, pure. The other poem that we will look at is on page 790 of your hymnal, and we'll come to it later. But you'll want to look at it now just briefly with me as we take a look at The World is Too Much With Us. Let's just put it in our notes this way. The break with the Enlightenment of the Romantics is in large measure the critique of the mall. Can I just use that term? That wretched hole where all those stores are and people go and buy stuff there. You'll remember in our comments maybe way back when we talked about Socrates, he sat at the center of the agora, the mall, where he did what? Well, he ostensibly critiqued the life of common people who had given so much of their life to the drachma, to the money, the stuff. Take a look at Wordsworth's observation about malls. The world is too much with us late and soon. Whoa, world? The world of Ruthie's tree? No, not the world of nature is too much with us late and soon. Look at the next line. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Uh-oh, the malls. Little we see in nature that is ours. We've given our hearts away. A sordid boon. Now, this isn't physically giving our hearts away, but rather we've given our spiritual heart away. We no longer understand the importance of nature in our lives to connect us to what really matters, that is to say, the second box. Finally, the influences of the Romantic period. We cannot overstate this. It's quite remarkable. This time period is going to have tremendous, prodigious influence on the 20th century. Okay? In many ways, you could argue, you really cannot have those great three thinkers of Darwin, Marx, and Freud, who are going to be probably the three most influential thinkers of the 20th century, without this Romantic period is giving birth to it. As I said already, there seems to be this pendulum movement that will move from the classical to the Romantic, and back and forth it goes, right? From stability and order to some kind of disorder and adventure, we might think of it that way. Again, the 1950s to the 60s in U.S. history is a classic example. One of my favorite, though, little stories to kind of talk about the influence of the Romantics is the great musician Jim Morrison, who was the lead singer of that band in the middle of the 20th century, that important band in music theory called the Doors. Now, Morrison was known as a complete and total experimenter. There we call him a hellion. He did and tried everything. But almost for his entire adult life, he carried in his back pocket a folded up copy of the poetry of Lord Byron? Lord Byron? An old romantic poet. Why? Well, when we get to Byron, we'll maybe hear some of the arguments as to why Byron is going to kickstart what will later be called the Byronic hero. And of course, that kind of crazy poet, music artist type that's going to be caught up in a world of burning the candles at both ends. The last thing I would say is that it does seem to be an element of human desire, that we seem often to want to return to a simpler time. We have a tendency to look at the complicated world, a world of technologies, and sometimes maybe long for something simpler. We think later that Yeats about his Lake Isle of Innisfree. We think of Thoreau and his Walden. We will think often of the Romantic English poets. And as we meet them, we'll want to remind ourselves of that. But finally, maybe the single most important work of the Romantic period was not a poem in literature, in the English tradition, but rather a novel called Frankenstein. Now, of course, if you don't know the novel Frankenstein, you most always will make the assumption, which is false, that the monster in Frankenstein is named Frankenstein. Often, if, for example, someone is dressed to look somewhat like a monster or something, klutzy, people will call him Frankenstein or her Frankenstein. But if you know the novel, of course, the doctor in the novel is named Frankenstein, who creates a monster who's never given a name. And that monster does all kinds of terrible things. And in the end, of course, you have to have that final confrontation between creator and creation. But what many people fail to appreciate, and this is our final comment, is that Shelley, at 18 years old, when she wrote this thing, after, by the way, hanging out for a while with her lover Percy Bysshe Shelley, one of those three second-generation poets, and with Lord Byron, Percy's close pal, another one of those hellion Generation 2 poets, she wrote this story she called Frankenstein, and then she gave it a subtitle. The novel is actually not called Frankenstein. It's called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. That's the name of the novel. Modern Prometheus? And in that moment, Shelley, as an 18-year-old young girl, will tell the world it's time to use the word modern. And we'll begin to use it into the 20th century. If you want to talk about something that is new, that is challenging, can we say romantic, you use the term modern. Of course, by the middle of the 20th century, the term has been overused so much that we will begin to use the term postmodern. And by the 21st century, postmodern. What will they use next, I wonder? But finally, Shelley injects the word Prometheus to point out that the Romantic period is a period of Promethean ideas. Revolution, change, radical change. So an introduction to the Romantics. Come back and we'll study our first of the Romantic poets, Burns, and then Blake. Thank you.